Welcome to our course on effectively writing and preparing a change order request. Before we get rolling, I want to take a minute to lay out the groundwork for our discussion. Change order requests pass through multiple parties in the review process, and, as with any chain of communication, the originating party, typically the subcontractor, needs to be very thorough and clear to ensure the party at the other end of the chain, typically the owner, fully understands the facts of the matter at hand. And this isn't easy, as the majority of you partaking in this course probably already know. Today we'll discuss the perspectives of the subcontractor, general contractor, construction manager, and especially the owner, the roles of each of these parties, and how each of them views a change order request. With a good understanding of each other's perspectives, we'll then discuss how a subcontractor needs to explain their change order requests such that the reviewers, the GC and the CM, and the approver, the owner, understand the case and why the requested money is in fact valid and needs to be paid. Now, this isn't just a course for subcontractors. This course will teach general contractors how to help the subs state their cases clearly, and the better the subcontractors do their jobs in this regard, the easier the general contractor's job is going to be. This course also helps the owners and construction managers understand the subcontractor's perspective. And one more thing before we get started, and this is something I want to be very clear about. This is absolutely not a course that teaches subs or general contractors how to manipulate facts or present half-truths in an effort to get unwarranted change order requests approved. Throughout the industry, the change order process has a very bad reputation with regard to ethics. This course will not teach any unethical behaviors. Nor is this a course that helps owners or construction managers manipulate change order responses such as to swindle subs or general contractors out of their deserved money. This course is designed to help improve the communication channel from the subcontractor to the owner. This course helps subcontractors and general contractors explain the facts of a change order issue such that the facts are clearly conveyed to the CM and the owner, which helps the sub gain approval of their valid change order requests. We'll begin by defining the true intent of a subcontract. Subcontractors work with the general contractor, not for them. Because subcontractors are a lower contractual tier than the general contractor, there's a widespread misconception that subcontractors are subservient to general contractors. This is not true. The general contractor orchestrates the construction operation, but each individual subcontractor is fully and wholly responsible for their own work. Let's look at the definition of a subcontract from the Encarta Dictionary, and let's focus on the highlighted portion. To work on contract with a person or company who is a contractor to somebody else. In this definition, the term with a person or company, not for a person or company, is correctly used. A subcontractor is a partner with the general contractor. They do not work for the general contractor. There is no corporate tie between a general contracting company and a subcontracting company. They are independent businesses with individual expertises, and they work together in a partnership to construct a project. This is a very important distinction, and I cannot stress it more heavily. If a prime contract is a pie, a subcontract agreement is a piece of that pie. A subcontract agreement ties the subcontractor to all terms and conditions of the prime contract. This reference tying a subcontract to the prime contract might just be a single sentence in that thick subcontract agreement, but it's a very important sentence. This is really no different than the references tying subcontractors to drawings, specifications, soils reports, etc. Subcontracts are a delegated portion of the prime contract agreement and are bound by all provisions of the prime contract agreement. Signing a subcontract agreement is effectively signing on to all of the terms and conditions of the prime contract as well. The subcontractor bears all risks and is the recipient of all rewards associated with their piece of the pie. Of course, benefiting from the rewards is never a question. No sub will ever argue that they receive all benefits associated with their scope of work. So let's talk about the hard part, the risk. This is a big deal, but let's just talk about this with regard to change order issues. This means that the subcontractor is tied to the same terms as far as change order approval as the general contractor. It makes the general contractor and subcontractor equals in this regard. Of course, the general contractor takes the lead, but that doesn't change the fact that the subcontractor bears 100% of the risk. The general contractor is truly a contractual intermediary between the subcontractor and the owner in this regard. If the owner rejects a subcontractor's change order request that is clearly justified, it doesn't mean the general contractor still needs to pay the sub. It is the subcontractor's responsibility to appeal, claim, or whatever else is necessary to get their money. Subcontractors need to stay involved with their change order request approvals. Don't rely on the general contractor to just go take care of this for you. General contractors will have 50, 75, or 100 other subcontractors on a job. Don't expect special treatment. The general contractor is going to pass these change order requests through to the owner quickly, and they don't have the time to give each subcontractor special attention. Now, in your personal life, you probably wouldn't trust somebody else with your money. I wouldn't trust somebody else with your money in the professional life either. You can't just leave it all up to the general contractor. You've got to take charge and take ownership of your own change order request. Don't expect the general contractor to step in and do it for you. Let's talk about change order approval duration versus a company's cash flow. When you're running a business, cash flow is crucial. Without positive cash flow, you won't stay in business long. Let's walk through the process of getting paid for just a single change order request and discuss why it takes so long. Although no one will like why getting paid for a change order request takes so long or ever be agreeable to waiting a long time for their money, it's still important to understand the process and the reasons behind what always seems to be a tremendous delay. Now, I'm not going to try to convince you to like this process, but I do want you to understand it. The better you understand the process and the more knowledgeable you are about it, the better chance you have of expediting it. Let's go through a timeline, and this timeline assumes very, very good circumstances and a great effort by all of the different parties involved. Day 1, the work is completed. And we'll keep it simple and figure that this extra work is something that was completed in just one day. By the time the foreman gets their field tags to the project manager, and then the project manager has a chance to collect the pricing from material suppliers and equipment rentals, and then put it all on paper and mail it to the general contractor, we're usually looking at a couple weeks, even with the diligent project manager. We all know that this initial step actually often takes a lot longer than 2 weeks, and that's something that executives are never happy about. So let's assume good conditions and assume that the project manager is in fact getting their change order requests submitted to the GC within 2 weeks of the work being performed. By day 15, the subcontractor has paid their field crews, they've paid the material suppliers, they've paid their equipment rentals, and they are now out of pocket for this money. After a sub submits the change order request to the general contractor, the GC needs to review the change order request, combine it with any other subs involved, and then pass on the pricing to the owner. If there are multiple subs involved, and there commonly are, the general contractor will need to combine the pricing from all subs associated with an individual issue and submit a single consolidated change order request for that issue to the owner. This is where change order requests are often held up. If there are 5 subs involved with an issue and one of them is negligent in providing their pricing, all the rest of the subs have to wait. I've seen a single sub hold things up for months, and it's not fair to the other subs involved, but it's an unfortunate reality in the industry. Now, I don't want to get sidetracked here, but we are going to talk about how to deal with these delinquent fellow subcontractors a little later in this course. Let's assume for the purposes of this timeline that there's only one sub involved, and the general contractor is able to get through this step in about 2 weeks, which brings us to day 30. This step is not just a paper processing routine. The general contractor needs to review every change order request that comes through their office in conjunction with all of their other duties. They often have questions that a sub needs to answer, and fairly frequently they need to request revisions from subcontractors before they can submit the change order request to the owner. A general contractor is doing a pretty good job if all this happens within 2 weeks, because remember, your change order request is just one of a million things they need to do. They have 1,000 things going on at any one time, and your change order request is just one of them. Now, I'm not pointing this out as an excuse for general contractors by any means. I'm simply pointing this out to subcontractors as a reality that you need to deal with. Next, the construction manager and owner need to review and approve the change order request. Again, CMs and owners each have 1,000 things going on at any one time, and your change order request is just one of them. If the owner and/or CM can review the change order request, verify the facts, analyze the pricing, resolve any questions they have with the general contractor, and then finally approve the request within 2 weeks, they're actually doing a pretty good job. A signature on the bottom line of a change order request doesn't mean we can bill for the costs. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but we do have to go through the accounting formalities and pageantries that have become accustomed throughout our industry. Until an owner issues an official contract change order, which is a legal document that formally adds the value of the change order request to the prime contract agreement, the work cannot be billed for. Contract change orders, or CCOs as they're commonly called, are usually issued once a month by the owners, and a single CCO will encompass all of the change order requests an owner has approved over the previous month. Because CCOs are issued once a month, this step can take anywhere from 1 to 31 days. So for the purposes of this timeline, let's just take the mean and figure that this step will occur in 15 days, which brings us all the way up to day 60 since the work was performed. Now, that CCO only added money to the prime contract between the owner and the general contractor. So next, the general contractor has to add the money formally to each individual subcontract. They do this by issuing subcontract change orders, or SCOs. When the general contractor receives a CCO, they tend to act comparatively quickly, so let's assume for this step that they get the subcontract change orders issued within about 10 days. When subcontractors receive change orders in the mail, they don't mess around. Those things get signed within a day or two. So including the mailing time from the general contractor to the subcontractor, and then the return mailing from the subcontractor to the general contractor, let's assume that this process only takes a week. Once a subcontract change order is signed and returned to the general contractor, it still doesn't mean the sub gets their money quite yet, but it does mean that the sub can include the value of that change order in their next monthly billing. Of course, each sub is handled individually when it comes to subcontract change orders. Subcontractors don't have to wait for each other as they do in the earlier step of compiling and submitting a change order request to the owner. Because billings are submitted once a month, this step could be anywhere from 1 to 31 days. So let's again take the mean and assume that the subcontractor has to wait 15 days for the next monthly billing cycle. A subcontractor needs to get their pricing to the general contractor a few days before the general contractor submits his billing. The owner then has 30 days to pay the general contractor, and after the general contractor receives their money, they have another 10 days to pay the subcontractor. All in all, this will be about 45 days. This brings us to day 135 before the subcontractor finally receives their money. That means that this cash is out of pocket for 4 months. That's a 4-month loan for this money. Now, I am not by any means whatsoever making excuses for general contractors, construction managers, or owners for this delay. What I am trying to do is explain the reality of the construction industry, and only by understanding this process can we take steps to expedite it. Let's discuss the roles of the reviewers, which are the general contractor and construction manager, and the approver, which is the owner. We need to remember that we're not writing a change order request to the general contractor. We're writing it to the owner. The general contractor and construction manager are both reviewers of change order requests. They're not approvers. Although we need the general contractor and construction manager to concur with both the reason for the change order request and the value, they are both really intermediaries. The owner is the approver of change order requests. It is the subcontractor's job to provide an explanation and justification for their own change order requests. This includes a written narrative of the issue and compiling all the backup documentation. It's the subcontractor's money, so the subcontractor has to do the work. Remember, to ensure there aren't any holdups in the change order processing, always prepare a change order request with the assumption that the owner knows nothing about the issue. Owners don't spend a lot of time on site, so for the smaller and less obscure issues, the owner may not even know about them until your change order request shows up. Now let me sidetrack to a bit of a case study on this issue. A subcontractor might think, well, the general contractor superintendent saw us do the work and he knows what the issue is. And the subcontractor won't worry about it because that general contractor superintendent knows what the issue is. Well, as I mentioned, the owner is the person with the money and the person that we need to write the descriptions for. But secondly, remember that change order requests go to the project manager, not the superintendent. After the superintendent signs a field tag, they have nothing more to do with the change order issues. Although the superintendent might know about the issue at hand, we can't rely on that superintendent to explain it to the project manager, CM, or owner. There are hundreds or even thousands of change order requests on a project, and the superintendent doesn't have time to deal with those. The superintendent needs to concentrate on the construction operation, not going to his partner, the project manager, owner, or construction manager to explain a subcontractor's case for a change order issue. Although the project superintendent may know everything about the issue, the project superintendent does not have time to state the subcontractor's case or help the subcontractor through the change order process. A good description is absolutely critical to expediting the approval process. You're writing the description to the owner, not to the general contractor. Don't just give your change order request to the general contractor and expect them to just go take care of it. It's your money, so you're the one with a vested interest in getting paid. The general contractor has a lot of other subs submitting change order requests as well. And whether you like it or not, your requests are going to be placed into one great big change order processing machine. So you can't plan on getting special treatment. The truth is that many general contractors do absolutely nothing but slap a cover sheet on top of a sub's change order request, and pass it on to the owner. In fact, they just cut and paste the subcontractor's information onto their own cover sheet without even reading it many times. Now, this is not something a competent general contractor does, but we can't focus on what a general contractor should be doing. We need to focus on the reality of what general contractors are doing. Most owners have careers in industries other than construction, so change order requests need to be written such that a layperson can understand them. A lot of owners have never built a building before, especially in the private commercial sector. These owners may hire construction managers to manage the project and look out for their best interest, but the one thing these owners are still going to keep their hands on are their wallets. All owners, even if they've hired a CM to look out for them, will still review and approve change order requests personally. This means that we need to explain the issues in a manner that they can understand, even if this is their very first construction project. Now, we may not like the fact that we have to explain things to someone with little or no construction knowledge, but it's a fact we have to live with nonetheless. Now put yourself in that owner's shoes. If it were your project, would you trust anyone but yourself with the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars that might be going out the door in added costs? I know I wouldn't. And remember, the owner is going to sit and read the change order request by themselves. We want them to understand the issues and provide their approval without having to involve the CM or GC. In other words, we don't want to add a question and answer step to this process. So let's go over how this works really quickly. Owners periodically receive a stack of change order requests from the construction manager to review. The owner then goes off and reviews these change order requests on their own. Then the owner comes back to the CM with two stacks. One stack is the change order requests that are approved and will continue gliding right through the process. The second stack are the change order requests that the owners have questions about, and those requests are not going to get signed until the questions are sufficiently answered. Obviously, we all want our requests to wind up in that first stack, not the second one. Let's go through the 4 basic principles of a change order request description, then we'll go through some examples. Every description should include a statement regarding what the contract documents showed or were missing, i.e., the problem. You must also have a statement concerning what the contract documents should have shown, i.e., the solution. Provide an itemized explanation of the differences between what the contract documents showed incorrectly or were missing and what the contract documents should have shown. The statements from items 1 and 2 are not enough. We want to clearly explain the differences to the owner so that there aren't any questions. The goal of a change order request description is to prevent the owner from having any questions. If an owner has a question, the owner's not going to make a quick call to the subcontractor to get the question taken care of. The way it works is that the owner will wait until the next time they sit down with the construction manager to discuss change order issues, and that might be a week or more away. Then, the owner will ask the easy question to the CM at that point. The construction manager will then need to wait until the next time they meet with the general contractor to sit down and discuss change orders, and that might be another week or more. The general contractor will then ask the sub the question, the sub will respond, and the answer spends another couple weeks going back up these same channels. That's cumbersome, I know, and none of us like it, but it's a fact of life that we need to deal with. And lastly, we need to identify and attach the documents that made the change and authorize the work to proceed. This is important. Don't just reference an RFI or ASI from the description. Attach them. We don't want the reviewers to have to go looking for these documents. We want them right there with the change order request. Sure, the general contractor, construction manager, and owner could all go and look up RFIs or ASIs, but we don't want them to have to go look these things up. We want them right there, right in front of them. We want to make the change order review process as easy as humanly possible. The easier you make it, the quicker your change order requests will get passed through the system. Let's next go through some examples of both good and bad descriptions. An example of a poor description would be simply writing RFI number 75. Of course, this RFI might be attached as backup to the change order request, so the owner can look at it, but let's say the RFI question was, do the room 10 walls need to be rated? And the architect responded to this question and said, use type D walls. Now this is a sufficient RFI response. The sub will know in this hypothetical example that type A non-rated walls were called out in the drawings, and the type D wall that the architect said to use is in fact a rated wall, so it'll be built just fine. However, an owner with little or no construction experience won't realize what this cost is for. Since the RFI response just said, use type D walls, the owner doesn't even know if the drawing said to use type D walls in the first place or if this is a change. As far as they know, a wall is a wall. We need to explain the change order request as if they are being presented to a lay person. Of course, this is not always the case. Some owners are very knowledgeable about construction, but we can't count on that. Now let's look at how this description should have been written. Per RFI number 75, the walls at room 10 are to be type D, which means they will receive 2 layers of 5/8 inch chipboard on each side. These walls are identified on A2.01 as type A, which per sheet A9.01 have only 1 layer of 5/8 inch chipboard. This change order request represents the added cost for the second layer of gypsum board necessary to achieve the code required fire rating. In this good example, we've accomplished the 4 key criterion discussed in the last slide. We have stated the problem, that the drawings only show 1 layer but need 2. We've stated the solution, to add a second layer. We've stated the difference between the two. For this example, that's obvious. And by attaching RFI number 75 as backup, the documentation from the design team acknowledging the issue and authorizing the work to proceed has been provided. Okay, let's do another one. For this bad example, let's look at the description, sink at room 310. Okay, there's a sink in room 310. So what? There are a lot of sinks in a lot of rooms. Heck, this description doesn't even mention that the sink was added. Here's a better way to write this description. Sheet P2.04 does not show a sink in room 310, but per ASI number 10, a sink is to be added. Note that sheet A2.04 does in fact show a rectangle where this sink was intended, but this is just a rectangle and has no description. Sheet P2.04 does not even have this rectangle, nor is the piping shown to this location. We've stated the problem, the sink isn't shown. We've stated the solution, to add a sink. And we've stated the difference between the two. We mentioned not just the addition of the sink, but also clearly stating that the piping was missing also. And finally, by attaching ASI number 10 as backup, we will be providing the documentation from the design team. In this case, the owner's reaction was also anticipated and responded to. When reviewing this change order request, the owner might see a rectangle and say, "Hey, there's a sink right there. I see it plain as day." This description is one step ahead by acknowledging the rectangle and explaining why it could not have been reasonably interpreted as a sink. By stating that the piping is not shown to this location, we not only inform the owner of why he'll see pricing for the piping, but because piping wasn't shown, it helps support our case that we could not have reasonably inferred that a sink was required in this location, even though the architectural drawings did show a rectangle. A construction-savvy owner wouldn't need these explanations, but we always need to assume the person we're writing this to is a layperson. There's no harm in writing extremely detailed descriptions with more information than the owner might need. Try to put yourself in the owner's shoes and read your descriptions from their perspective. This takes some practice and quite a bit of experience, but if you can think like a layperson and anticipate their reactions, you can provide proactive descriptions that will help your case. Also, it's worth noting that we just want to state the facts and in a very friendly and courteous manner. Although we're writing to a layperson, we don't want to write in a condescending tone or in a manner that makes the owner feel stupid. Now, I thought this worth mentioning, but it is pretty obvious that you don't want to irritate the guy you're asking for money. That's just plain common sense. Here's another poor description. Field tags 2234 through 2239. This doesn't even say what the field tags are for. Are they even for the same issue, or just a stack of various issues? Are they all changes the owner is responsible for? Or are some or all of these tags something the general contractor or other subs are responsible for? The field tags may be attached, but those things aren't always very clear, or in many cases even legible. Okay, here's a better description. Per ASI number 27, crown molding was added in all offices on the second floor. This is a total of 13 offices. The time and materials expended were tracked on field tickets number 2234 through 2239 and verified by the general contractor. The work is complete. Again, explain your change order request as if you're writing to a layperson. Now, I'm not going to reiterate anything from the last 2 slides, but notice the statement, "This work is complete." Without this statement, the owner will wonder if this is the total cost or if another change order request for later field tags is coming. This may not sound like a big deal when field tags are concerned, since the actual time and materials are being verified on a daily basis, but the fact is that owners like to pay for issues all at once, not in pieces. And most general contractors won't even submit a change order request to the owner until all costs have been attained. If an owner gets a second change order request for this same work, the first question he's going to ask is, "Didn't I already pay for this?" It's a simple question, but as we discussed earlier, even a simple question could set the payment process back a month or more. Now, there will be cases when the work is not complete because the last portion needs to be completed at a later date, and that's okay. Just note it in the description, explain what is not complete and why it's not complete. For instance, if crown molding was also added on the 9th floor, and the 9th floor interior build-out wasn't going to happen for another 3 months, the subcontractor will want to get paid for the crown molding on the 2nd floor right away, and the owner is going to need to expect a change order request down the road for the 9th floor. That's okay, as long as the owner knows it's coming. Making this statement and being clear is a courtesy, and it helps keep the owner from becoming very irritated later in the project when that second change order request comes through. As I mentioned before, and as good common sense dictates, you don't want to irritate the guy you're asking for money. It's kind of like telling a surgeon he's a jerk right before he performs open heart surgery on you. It's not a good idea. Let's do an example with field tickets. Field tickets are the genesis of documentation for many change order requests. As always, the description is critical. Now, a bad example for a description would be simply angles at stair number 2. Again, this doesn't even say the angles were added or in any way out of scope, nor does it say if it's something that the owner is responsible for. Maybe they were required because another sub made a mistake. From this description, we just can't tell. This brings us to a very important point that many subs really tend to neglect. Many subcontractors know that they're due money for an issue, and that the general contractor is responsible for getting that money for them. But we have to pay attention to who the general contractor is getting money from. Is the owner financially responsible? Or is it due to a bidding error and something that the general contractor is financially responsible for? Or maybe the additional work is the result of another subcontractor's mistake, which means that other sub is financially responsible. I know what many of you are thinking right now. It's the general contractor's job to assign responsibility. And you're right. But remember, the more the subcontractor can help the general contractor by making their descriptions clear, the easier it is for the general contractor to get the change order request processed, and the faster the payment's going to be made, regardless of which other party is holding the financial responsibility. Whether the owner, general contractor, or another subcontractor holds financial responsibility, here's a good example for a description. Installed 3 each 24-inch long, 4-inch by 4-inch by 3/8 inch angles at stair number 2 per RFI number 123. These angles are necessary to support the intermediate stair landing from grids 1.2C to 1.5C due to a conflict between details 4 on A8.21 and 1 on S5.03. This is a very clear description, and it also makes it obvious that the owner is responsible. Just because a field ticket is signed doesn't mean it will or even should be paid. When the general contractor superintendent signs a field ticket, what he's doing is verifying the time, materials, and equipment identified by the field tag were in fact used for the task described. They are not accepting financial responsibility. The reason for this is because financial responsibility is not always easy to determine. We need superintendents to sign the tags in an expedient manner, and that's what field tags are for. However, we cannot expect the GC superintendent to stop what they're doing in the middle of the day for 20 to 30 minutes to go research contracts and determine financial responsibility prior to signing the field tag. Adding to this confusion is that field tags presented by subcontractors routinely contain standard pre-printed boilerplate language that states that a signature represents full and unconditional approval of all costs accrued for the work described. The reality subcontractors must understand is that change order issues can be quite complicated. As such, it's not a realistic expectation for a superintendent to perform the extensive research necessary to establish financial responsibility while they're hurriedly orchestrating the construction operation. GC superintendents are often taught to write, "This signature represents a verification of time and materials only," directly above their signature, and that's a good practice. Unfortunately, in reality, superintendents have been known to omit this important language when they're in a hurry and simply just sign the documents as they're presented. The reality of field tags is that even if verification of time and materials only is not written by the superintendent, it is still implied. Subcontractors' field foremen initiate the field tags, but their involvement in the change order process usually ends at that point. One of the main reasons foremen tend to shortcut their description writing is because they're not typically involved with the change order process and don't understand it. They pass their field tags off to the office staff and never look back at them again. As a result, they don't gain the necessary experience to understand how truly important their descriptions are. Foremen and superintendents are notorious for simply saying, "As far as I'm concerned, they just need to pay it." Well, the foremen and superintendents do need to understand that owners, general contractors, and construction managers aren't going to just take their word for it. A subcontractor's foreman might be right. They may very well be due the money. But no self-respecting GC, CM, or owner is going to hand over a pile of money based simply on the foreman's word. I can't stress this enough. Be sure your foremen and superintendents are providing complete descriptions. Teach them about the change order process so they understand how important their descriptions are. Executives should repeatedly remind them about the importance of their documentation, because a reminder from an executive always hits home a lot better than a reminder from a project manager. This is an aspect the subcontractor executives should really keep their eye on. My suggestion to the executives is to periodically review the field tags written by your various foremen and be sure they're taking the time to write full and descriptive tags. Then reinforce the importance with any of the guys that seem to be getting too lackadaisical in this important aspect of their jobs. Now, there's a lot happening on a job site, and foremen are busy. And when they get busy, they have a tendency to take shortcuts. But shortcutting the descriptions can cost a lot of money. Writing an extended description like this only takes another minute or two, but filling out paperwork is no fun no matter how long it takes, so that's why a little bit of arm twisting with the foremen and superintendents is often necessary. The tediousness of this writing is the main reason that foremen and superintendents tend to write short, abbreviated descriptions. Next, we'll talk about the protocols of the change order process. The subcontractor is not present when the general contractor and owner or construction manager discuss the change order issues. This emphasizes why the subcontractor needs to state their case clearly and completely. Once that change order request is submitted to the general contractor, the sub might not have another chance to provide their input. Similarly, neither the construction manager or owner are in the room when the general contractor and subcontractor discuss change order issues. There is very little interaction between subcontractors and owners for any reason, including change order issues. I mention this to further emphasize why providing good written narratives and sufficient backup is so important. The general contractor's role is to facilitate fair and equitable resolutions to change order issues. The GC is truly an intermediary when it comes to a sub's change order request. They do not and should not favor either the sub or the owner. They need to fight for fair and equitable resolutions. A fair day's pay for a fair day's work. The GC needs to be sure the sub receives compensation for their work, and they definitely don't want the sub to be underpaid. But at the same time, the general contractor also wants to be sure that the owner doesn't overpay. The GC should never favor the owner or the sub in a change order negotiation. The GC is truly an intermediary when they're discussing a sub's change order request with the owner. Always submit separate change order requests for each individual issue. For small or relatively straightforward CORs, subcontractors often provide just one letter with a dozen or so different issues priced out as line items. Now, this might be an easy way for the subcontractor to submit a group of CORs, but it's not efficient for the GC, the CM, or the owner. And we need each of those guys to put a blessing on the change order request before it's going to get paid, so we want to make their jobs as easy as possible. Remember, the general contractor submits change order requests to the owner that compile all subcontractor pricing for individual issues. They don't segregate their change order requests by trade. When a subcontractor presents a single letter with, say, a dozen different change order issues on it, what happens is the general contractor runs copies for each of those individual issues and uses them as backup for their change order request that they pass on to the owner. So when the general contractor uses that letter as backup for each individual change order request, they'll X out the 11 non-applicable items and circle the one applicable item on that letter. And that mangled document is not just unprofessional, but it can be very confusing as well. If there's 11 X'd out items and just one circled, the CM and the owner are both going to spend time trying to figure out what they're looking at, and are probably going to come back with questions. And sure, those questions can be suitably answered, but remember, adding a question step into the process takes more time, and that delays payment. Submitting a separate change order request for each individual issue will benefit everyone. When it comes to their own work, the subcontractors are the subject matter experts. However, general contractors, construction managers, and owners have only a general knowledge of each individual building trade. There are a lot of different people involved with a construction project, and they all have their own individual expertise. The architect is an expert at designing a building, the electrical sub is an expert at the electrical installation, the general contractor is an expert at coordinating the subs, and I could go on for an hour listing all the different experts involved with the project. However, there are two similarities we all have in common. First, we're all experts in our own trade, whether it be design, management, or a subcontracted trade. And secondly, none of us are experts in all the other trades. This is specifically why we have so many different designers and so many different subcontractors involved with the project. The fact of the matter is that no one could ever learn everything there is to know about every different trade in a single lifetime. So, with this in mind, we need to be cognizant that things that we see as simple and second nature within our own areas of expertise might be brand new lessons to another project team member. As it pertains to this course, this is particularly important with regards to an owner's understanding of a subcontractor's work. Each subcontractor is intimately knowledgeable of the work they perform on site. However, general contractors, construction managers, and owners have only a cursory knowledge of the work each subcontractor performs. A subcontractor's superintendent and foreman will know everything going on with respect to their work on site. But remember, the general contractor might have 20 or more subs on site at any one time, and they're overseeing the whole project. They aren't standing over one sub watching their work. For instance, a framing foreman will probably know right off the top of his head what width and gauge of studs are in a certain wall. But without looking at the wall or the drawings, a general contractor will only know whether or not the wall is done yet. Further, it's the owner who needs to approve change order requests, and they know even fewer details of the subcontractor's work than the GC does. This is why written documentation and good descriptions are so important for change order requests. Now we'll talk about the importance of line item breakdowns. The following should always be taken into consideration when preparing a change order request. Provide complete labor, material, and equipment breakdowns. We need to do all the work estimating and calculating these numbers anyway, so all this means is that we need to show it on the change order request. And this might be as simple as stapling your notes to the back of your cover letter. Provide a clear description for each individual line item. Break out labor, material, and equipment pricing as necessary for these individual descriptions. Of course, we already discussed the descriptions for the cover sheet, but we also need to be sure that the general contractor, construction manager, and especially the owner all fully understand each individual line item. Avoid using unit costs that have not been previously agreed to. Of course, if unit costs were provided with a sub's bid, agreed to, and incorporated into the subcontract agreement, by all means use them, as they've clearly already been agreed to. But for unit costs that have not been agreed to, remember, unit costs are not tangible. What I mean by this is that people don't think in terms of unit costs. People think in terms of labor, material, and equipment. Don't surprise an owner, CM, or GC with unit costs they've never seen before, because the fact is that to analyze the unit cost to see that they're fair, what the GC, CM, and owner need to do is prepare their own estimate to develop their own total cost and compare their estimated total cost to the total cost of your change order request. The CM, GC, and owner aren't going to use your unit costs at all. So to be honest, all the CM, GC, and owner are going to see with regard to your change order request is the bottom line total value, which is effectively just seeing a single lump sum value, and we don't want that. Further, and this is very important, we do not want owners, construction managers, or general contractors providing their own estimates for the work that a subcontractor has done. As I mentioned earlier in this course, owners, CMs, and GCs are not experts at the subcontractor's work. This means that they're probably going to forget and/or underestimate a lot of things in the peer review estimate that they provide. Experience has shown that estimates prepared by GCs, CMs, and owners are routinely lower than the estimates prepared by the subcontractors. Don't fall into this trap. Provide sufficient information that the reviewers and approver don't need to do their own estimates. And of course, also remember that the time it takes for the GC, CM, and owner to analyze the pricing and prepare their peer review estimates is going to add time to the process, which is going to delay payment to the subcontractor. And I'll reiterate this once again. A change order request should always be prepared as if it were being submitted to a layperson. They should be easy to read and easy to follow. The easier they are to read and the easier they are to follow, the faster the subcontractor will get paid. Change order requests stipulating only a lump sum value are not easily approved. Put yourself in the owner's shoes. You get a change order request for, let's say, $20,000, but you're not quite sure how the sub came to this value. The truth is, you wouldn't pay it until you fully understood what it was that you were paying for. This is why it's so difficult to get owners to pay lump sum change order requests. Provide all information used to calculate the pricing. This means providing your takeoff quantities and showing the calculation times the material unit cost, not just a single material cost value. For instance, if you have 100 4-inch studs and 100 6-inch studs, these two different stud sizes should be separate line items. This also means showing the total labor hours for each classification, i.e. the foreman, journeyman, apprentice, multiplied times the respective hourly rate for each classification. The level of pricing detail shown on a change order request is equal to the level of detail a subcontractor uses in preparing their estimates. Now, this sounds like more detail than the owner might need, and you're right, it might be more than they need. But that's okay, it's actually a really good thing. The provision of more information and greater detail shows the owner two very important things. First, it shows the owner that that subcontractor has absolutely nothing to hide. When a subcontractor essentially opens their books to the GC, owner, and construction manager, it shows honesty. When we open our books for everyone to see, we can't possibly be hiding anything. And I'll tell you, this really sets an owner at ease, and it helps them develop a high level of trust with the subcontractor. And when you're trying to get change order requests approved, that level of trust is a tremendous asset. Secondly, it shows the owner that the subcontractor really has performed a thorough job of pricing the extra work. When we show a high level of detail, it's proof that we haven't just thrown an arbitrarily high number at it. Sufficient backup documentation is of paramount importance. Change order requests that lack backup documentation usually entail multiple rounds of questions, which results in a significantly longer processing time. Always attach copies of the RFI, ASI, Notice to Proceed, Field Directive, or other authorizing document, even though the GC, CM, and owner all do have access to those documents. Don't make them go to the drawings or RFI binders to verify your request. Put everything they need right smack in front of them. Let's look at it statistically. It may only take 5 minutes for them to go check the RFI binder and drawings, but let's say they have 24 requests to review. 24 change order requests times 5 minutes each additional time for the reviewer equals 2 hours of extra time. When you add it up, that's a lot of time. This is why the clear and complete change order requests make it through the process so much faster. Remember, your request is just one of many in a big stack, and that stack is just one of many big stacks throughout the course of a project. Always attach quotes received from lower tier subcontractors, and of course break out each quote as a separate line item. This not only provides proof of the cost, but it also shows the reviewers and approver that you're not trying to hide anything. The more backup documentation that's attached to a change order request, the higher the comfort level the reviewers and approver will have. This is what we want. We want our change order request approved in a timely manner, and for all involved to know that they're being treated fairly. Also keep in mind that GCs, CMs, and owners frequently ask for this sort of backup anyway, so it's best to go ahead and provide it right from the get-go, and that'll help prevent a round of questions. And, as mentioned before, even though this may be a very quick and easy question to handle, questioning rounds inevitably delay payment. Attach everything that was used to calculate the bottom line number on your change order request. Schedule comparisons. This is essential if you're asking for extra time. Now, I really can't tell you how many schedule requests I've seen on sub-quotes that are made with just a single line that says something like, additional time requested equals 2 days. Although I've probably seen this written 1,000 times, I can honestly say that I've never even once seen a time extension granted for a vague statement like this. Further, that statement could very well hold up your payment. The owner may not have a problem at all with the value of the change order request itself, but if they take exception to the time extension requested, that will be reason enough to hold up approval. Time extensions are difficult to analyze, but if they're valid, they can be proven. And if they're valid, you have to prove them. Provide your takeoff sheets. When a sub provides takeoff sheets, all the reviewers and approver need to do is cross-check and verify the quantities. This is much easier for them than performing independent takeoffs of their own. And notably, it's human nature to cherry-pick the easiest stuff first, and this is very applicable to change order requests. For instance, let's say the GC's PM has a stack of 30 CORs that they need to review and submit to the owner. That PM is going to do the easiest ones first and the difficult ones last. You want your change order requests easy to review so that they get done first. Photographs are a huge benefit, and I don't just mean for documentation purposes. The huge benefit that I want to point out here is that a photo essentially takes the reviewers and approver out into the field and shows them the issue in question. Good photos save them the hassle of having to take a site walk to review your change order request. If we have to wait for them to do a site walk before giving approval for a request, it's going to delay payment. And it's worth noting that GCs, CMs, and owners all do job walks pretty regularly, but none of them are likely to do a job walk for the sole reason of verifying your individual change order request. So the reality is that we're not just waiting for them to do a job walk. We're waiting for them to remember to check out the issue associated with your change order request when they happen to be doing a job walk for another reason anyway. Daily reports are a great resource. Let's talk for a minute about how daily reports are viewed in the industry. First, superintendents have an excellent reputation for honesty and ethics. Construction superintendents are a great example for all business industries, and I'll tell you, there's quite a few of those Wall Street fellas that could learn from their example. Secondly, daily reports are written as a project progresses, before things go bad. So they're a great resource, written by honest people and with minimum bias, so they hold a lot of weight when it comes to change order requests. Let's now talk about ways we can manage and expedite the change order process from the position of a subcontractor. Good leadership skills can do a lot to help get paid sooner. Friendly follow-ups to the general contractor do a great deal of good. Now that's pretty self-explanatory, but there are two things that I think worth mentioning here. Always maintain a friendly tone. Remember that people like to help their friends, and they aren't so concerned about helping people that are mean to them. Now you need to maintain your persistence to get paid, but maintain your politeness at the same time. Use emails so you have a written record of your follow-ups. It's a good idea to have written records of our follow-ups for those times when the friendly reminders don't work and we need to move past the friendly reminders and start getting stern. We'll talk a little more about getting stern in a few minutes. A lot of lawyer types these days say that emails don't hold any weight legally. Well, when it comes to change order requests and when it comes to business relationships, I disagree. Emails do hold a lot of weight politically, and they hold a lot of weight when it comes to business relationships. Always request a written status of each individual change order request. If you send an email that just says, "Hey, general contractor, how are our CORs coming along?" He'll just respond back and say, "Yeah, they're good." They won't even look up the status of your request. They'll just say good, move on, and never look back. And that does you absolutely no good. When you ask for a written status of each individual request, it makes the general contractor look up each one and tell you where they're at. They'll have to tell you which ones they haven't gotten off to the owner yet, and they're going to be embarrassed about anything that they're lagging behind on. That's good. They should be embarrassed, and we want them to acknowledge that they need to get your CORs moving along. Additionally, by getting this in writing, it gives us backup in case things drag on too long and we have to start getting stern. Routinely ask the general contractor, "What can I do to help speed things along?" When it comes to getting paid, you never want to go home for the day wondering if there's something more you could have done. If there's an executive sitting next to you right now, they're probably bobbing their heads up and down in agreement to that statement. Let the general contractor know that you'll do whatever they need to get things moving quicker. And if they do ask for something, such as questions answered or descriptions clarified, do it immediately. Try and get it done within 24 hours. By responding immediately, it helps set a sense of urgency, and that's what's commonly termed leadership by example. When delays occur, sitting idly by with your fingers crossed doesn't work. You have to take polite action. If another subcontractor is holding up the process, don't wait for the general contractor. Take polite action yourself. Subcontractors don't have direct contracts with each other, but they do have good working relationships with each other. If during one of your friendly reminders to the general contractor, you find that one of your change order requests is being held up due to another sub, dig further into it. There might be another subcontractor who hasn't submitted their pricing for a specific issue yet. If this is the case, find out who that other sub is and give them a call or send them an email. Start with their project manager, but if that subcontractor's PM isn't responsive, go to their executive. Now put yourself in that executive's shoes. You would not like getting a phone call from one of your fellow subcontractors saying that their money is being held up because your PM hasn't submitted pricing to the GC yet. I guarantee you, that executive will get on that project manager right away. Now this is the easy one, and a quick phone call usually does a lot of good. Is there another sub that isn't responding to questions in a timely manner? Again, call their project manager and give them a friendly nudge. If that doesn't work, give that subcontractor's executive a call. Or there might be another sub who's submitted what appears to be inflated pricing. This is where things get more difficult. And if this is the case, The general contractor might be quite hesitant to tell other subs when there's one that's being unreasonable. Every project and every relationship is different. But if you have a good relationship with the general contractor, they'll probably tell you when there's a dispute with another sub, although they'll probably tell you verbally off the record rather than in an email. Ask the general contractor if they think it's something that will be resolved quickly or if they think it'll take a while. If they think a resolution is imminent, just let it ride and wait for your money. However, if the general contractor thinks this is a big issue that's going to take a while, request that your portion of the change order request be separated from the pack and handled individually. This is a pretty common way of handling situations in which there are multiple subs involved with the request, but only one of them is holding things up. This is a big hassle for the general contractor, so they're not going to do it unless requested. This won't always work. Sometimes owners will refuse to allow segregated pricing, and in those cases, fighting might be more trouble than it's worth. You have to make your own judgment calls. But nevertheless, you should never stop trying. If the general contractor's on-site team isn't getting change order requests moving quick enough, contact the vice president. VPs hate getting emails like this, and the PM on the project is going to hate that call he gets from the vice president even more. You don't want to pull this trigger too quickly, because you don't want to develop friction in your working relationship with the PM. You're going to be working together for a long time. But at the same time, it's your money, and they need to get it for you. My suggestion is to contact the vice president only if the PM is letting things sit way too long. Every situation is different, so I'll let you each come up to your own definition of way too long. You'll need to weigh the importance of getting the money sooner versus how damaging the call to the vice president will be to your working relationship with that project manager. Of course, his follow-up with the VP should remain very friendly. Say something like, "Your project manager really seems to have his hands full out there and is so overloaded that he hasn't been able to process our change order requests. Is there something you can do to help him out? We really need to get this money." If you phrase it like this, you're really doing the best you can to help that project manager. Okay, let's talk briefly about some things we can do when the friendly reminders just aren't working. When things aren't going well, following up can be very tough. No matter how frustrated or upset you may be, never lose your cool. Don't raise your voice and don't get frustrated. Tempers do flare in these situations, but you've got to keep your temper under control. Never ever make personal attacks. Don't call a project manager stupid, and definitely don't call the owner stupid. You don't want to agitate the people you're trying to get money from. A constructive thing we can do is to request a meeting with the general contractor and owner together. If things seem to be in a stalemate with regard to owner approval and the GC just doesn't seem to be getting things done, ask to sit down with the owner and the general contractor together to discuss the issues and answer any questions they have. Experience has shown that this can do a world of good. Remember, subcontractors are experts at their work. GCs and owners do not have nearly the in-depth knowledge of each individual trade that subcontractors who focus their whole career on it do. Bringing that expertise to the table can be a huge benefit. However, interactions with the owner in the absence of the general contractor should always be avoided. Don't go directly to the owner without the GC involved. Don't go behind their back. That causes big problems with the general contractor, and when owners are approached directly by subcontractors, it makes them feel very uncomfortable. And you don't want to make the guy who you're asking for money feel uncomfortable. Stopping work, filing claims, and other counterproductive measures tend to hurt the subcontractor much more than the general contractor, CM, or owner. Sometimes there's really no other choice but to stop work, and sometimes you just have to do it. But unfortunately, stopping and starting work costs the subcontractor a lot of money in both inefficiency and in lost profits. If you're not working, you're not making money. When tensions and emotions flare up, subcontractors sometimes get so mad that they just say, "I'll get that darn general contractor. I'll just stop work. That'll show him." But the fact of the matter is that single sub stopping work usually does much more harm to the sub themselves than to the project or to the general contractor. Do everything you can within reason to keep the work progressing. I saved the most important topic for last: ethics. No matter what the general contractor, construction manager, or owner might throw at you, always maintain the highest degree of personal and professional ethics. Never, ever do anything that will make you lose respect for that person you see in the mirror every morning. Dealing with owners, CMs, and GCs who request arbitrary reductions is not easy. The best advice I can give is to keep your cool and request specific details from the person asking for the unreasonable reductions. For instance, when a construction manager says, "It just looks too high," calmly ask, "What portion appears too high, and why?" Since you've provided a detailed pricing breakdown and substantial backup to state your case when you initially submitted the change order request, as we discussed for the first 90% of this course, they should be able to provide specific questions. Logic will prevail. If a cost is justifiable, then it can be explained logically. Keep your cool and keep explaining, very politely, why your costs are accurate and justified. Let me say this again. Logic will prevail. If a cost is justifiable, then it can be explained logically. Something I've noticed about general contractors, CMs, and owners who request these arbitrary reductions is that you can really embarrass them into reasonable logic. For instance, when a CM says, "It just looks too high," keep questioning them on why it looks too high and challenge their expertise. Construction managers who say things like, "It just looks too high," are not good construction managers, and they can be embarrassed easily. If you keep prodding them for specificity, you'll embarrass them. Now, this is no surefire textbook technique. It's something I've learned from experience, and I want to pass this experience on to you. It won't work 100% of the time, but when you come across an unreasonable CM, owner, or general contractor, try that technique. Continually ask them for specificity. When they ask specific questions, you will be able to provide specific answers, and that is when logic will prevail. Now, there are many subcontractors out there who like to fight fire with fire, and they submit inflated change order requests in anticipation of arbitrary reductions from unethical general contractors, construction managers, and owners. This is not a healthy business practice or an ethical business practice. Now, this really happens a lot in our industry, and it's not in any way, shape, or form recommended. Fighting unethical acts with even less ethical acts is not a good practice. No matter how unethical a reviewer or approver might be, never lower yourself to their level. A phrase that's really used way too commonly in our industry is, "We'll make it up on the next one." Well, getting even with the general contractor on the next one really isn't getting back at the general contractor. You're stealing from the owner of the next one. The vast majority of change order requests are paid by the owner, not the general contractor. So if you try to inflate change order pricing on another later project that you have with that GC, you're not getting back at the general contractor at all. You are literally stealing money from the owner of that next project. Well, I'm going to leave you with just a couple words of advice. First, stay true to yourself and never lose respect for that person you see in the mirror every morning. Secondly, always remember, the easiest way to keep people from discovering something you're ashamed of is to avoid doing things for which you should be ashamed in the first place. Okay, that wraps up our course on effectively writing and preparing change order requests. I hope you've enjoyed it and that the knowledge gained here will help you expedite the change order process throughout the course of your career. Thanks for joining us.